Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good conference today. I am Roisin Wilmot, the RTPI's Director for Wales and Northern Ireland and Planning Aid England, and I've been given the tremendous task today to introduce your next speaker. We are very pleased to be joined today by Joanna Averley, who's the Chief Planner at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. You've certainly arrived at a very busy time for planning in England, Joanna. Joanna is relatively new into the Chief Planner role and the first woman to be in this position in England, but Joanna is not new to planning. She's worked across a range of sectors over her career. She has led multidisciplinary teams on significant projects across the UK, but has also been involved on smaller scale projects too. You could say she has a full portfolio. Most recently, Joanna has led the spatial planning and urban design thinking on Crossrail 2 and High Speed 2. Two very significant projects. If you have any questions for Joanna, please use the stage chat function and we'll come back to them after we've heard from Joanna. So I think we can say that Joanna's career certainly has depth, breadth and quality, and so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Joanna to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Roisin, and sorry for the shuffling in the background, everyone. I realised I had this conference open twice, so I was hearing everything in delay and hearing the thing in real time, which is never a good start. So it sounds like you guys have all been having a fantastic day. I've had a few people giving me feedback. You've covered lots of really powerful, important territory about leadership, about how we might be going down a digital journey in terms of planning. And I've just been asked to sort of just give you a few observations, and I suppose an insight into somebody who's a bit long in the tooth, 30 years a planner, and find myself in this amazing position of being chief planner. And I always have those kind of hilarious conversations where somebody sort of says, so oh, you're chief planner, where for? And I kind of sit back and kind of rather smirk and say, well, England. And then somebody who thought when I said I was chief planner working in government, they thought I planned the entirety of all government programmes, which was another rather amusing moment. But anyway, it's great to be with you. And I thought I was asked to sort of just give you some observations about what I suppose I've learnt and what I've picked up through my career. What I would slightly say to my 21-year-old self. Because reflection on what we learn as we go is a really powerful thing. So I'd give you some food for thought. I haven't prepared any slides because I think you've probably been slided out already through the day, but just here's a few reflections. I started my planning degree in 1988. And one of the books that we were asked to read, and I've gone very analog for this presentation, was called Remaking Planning. The subtitle of which is The Politics of Urban Change in the Thatcher Years. So I'm a child of the Thatcher era. My first election I ever remember in 1979-78, when Thatcher came into power and Ronald Reagan was in charge in the United States. But what is interesting is that it's a reflection on when I started in planning. We were all sort of driven by the fact that Thatcher had sort of said there is no such thing as society, and planning, and my interest in planning was one of about social change and positive change and the built environment's role in that process. But I think what's also just that great title just reminds us all that planning is always in a space that's political, and it's always about changing priorities as well. You all know that in your day jobs, but I think it's just worth always remembering that. And I think one of the lessons I've learned very firmly from the very get-go, I started my life in consultancy. Doing my first ever project was doing open space planning in London and doing data entry, literally 1010, which is a yes, no, on a survey of all London's public spaces. And we were putting all the information in and using very old tech to sort of measure the areas of public. But in those first years, I had a huge privilege to work with some amazing people who gave me an awfully good bedrock in thinking about how we research and understand the built environment around us and use research to help us think about the future. So there was open space planning, there was work on how you judge the quality of the built environment, particularly housing, then moving on to work about London's place as a full world city in comparison to Paris, New York and Tokyo, and trying to sort of see how our global cities might be changing. But in that time, and then in subsequent jobs, I had amazing opportunities. I worked with people like Peter Hall, sitting around talking about London in the early 90s. I mean, what a privilege was that, that amazing professor. And then through the next stages in my career, I've always had this very lucky time to have sort of really sage, experienced people who've been either commissioners or board members or other people that sit around me. And I'd really say, listen to those sage minds, keep being inquisitive, keep asking. And sometimes I think with planning in particular, we go around in loops and the issues can return. They might be slightly different, but we've probably at some point considered a very similar set of issues, but we're asked to look at them in a different way. And so do take the benefit of being inquisitive and asking people around you how to do things. The other thing I've learned through my career is about creative thinking and seeing planning as a creative exercise. You will all know this. Many of you will have had an education which was richer than mine in talking about the relationship of planning to architecture and placemaking and urban design and landscape and ecology and all those sorts of things, and economy and engineering. And so see planning in that space. Don't see it purely as a procedural process, but see it as an exercise that actually changes outcomes for real people in real time and in real places. And through my career, particularly when I was at CABE at the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment, was very lucky to sort of see an entire programme of work which we started from scratch develop, and which talked about the complete marriage of design, thinking and planning. So a spatial plan actually is about designing entire cities and places or towns within a landscape. The design of a house is architecture. But in between that is this complete melee of how design and placemaking and thinking should all be considered as a sort of continuum. The architect doesn't start where the planner stops. The architect and planner actually have both got the same objectives in mind. And that multidisciplinary way of thinking is something that I think really this country is really good at. It's partly because our professions are actually much more fine-grained, but it's also something that makes us really creative and have this fantastic industry. The other thing I'd sort of say is do keep an eye on the end product. It's sometimes easy to get lost. I think all of us can get lost in the day job, and sometimes we'll hit sort of barriers and challenges in terms of what we're trying to achieve. But sometimes very directly, I've been paid in my roles to be an advocate for design, to be an advocate for the quality of homes, the quality of schools, the quality of public spaces that result from all the myriad of decisions that go into planning. And so I would just sort of really say that to you, we're really lucky. Many of us will be in a profession that we feel passionate about personally. We feel passionate about the places we go and visit and we love and things like that. But, think about that in the decisions that you make professionally, sort of on a day-to-day basis, because those are the things that people are going to remember us for as well. I'd say know your numbers. Don't be scared of numbers. I think we're in this world with big data. We can look at numbers in a spatial sense now. We can really understand things hopefully quicker and sooner. It's not such a big exercise to sort of understand data and have it at our fingertips, but know what it's telling us, trying to figure out, use it to sort of inform decision making. But always remember, the numbers aren't going to give you the future. They're just going to tell you where you are now. So having the confidence to sort of look to scenarios as to what the future might hold, I think is a really important skill that planners are really good at. And your voice in that conversation is really important. Many of you on this call will be working in professional planners long after I've retired. So, your vision of your future is really important, and have your voice in those conversations. And also sort of saying that point of vision, what we as planners sort of do is assimilate lots and lots of information. We understand the legalities of things sometimes. We understand the practical aspects of delivering things, how to negotiate things, how to bring communities with us, how to, talk to different partners about delivery. But actually, the vision bit is something that planners are fantastic about. So feel really confident about doing that. The next thing I would sort of say is about interpersonal. There are various weird and wonderful things I've done in my career, and I'll give you a hint. My name was for a very short period of time on the wall at MoMA in New York, Museum of Modern Art, and I was invited to the opening event. That's good, just one little thing. And the reason why that happened is because I was part of an incredible set of people who, after the IRA bomb went off in Manchester in 1996, we were part of a kind of cohort called Manchester Millennium Limited, and I was on the master planning side, delivering the rebuilding programme for Manchester. It was a very tight team of people, probably really, the people who were really on it full time, about 30 people. And we saw that regeneration through, and it was really the start of the sort of renaissance of Manchester, but actually that sort of whole approach to proactive planning and thinking and design and spatial thinking on projects. On the back of it came Piccadilly Gardens, and then East Manchester, and then Sheffield City Centre, and then the different approaches that rolled out around city regeneration projects and major projects, which have resulted in all the schemes that you will all know and love, you know, King's Cross, and so on and so forth. But what's interesting is that ended up as a project on the wall of MoMA, and a book called Groundswell. So, you know, the exhibition book. So don't, you know, I know these always come back to front, but, you know, sometimes your job will get you into really interesting places. And the other little factoid about this project is our plans were blessed and put into the sanctuary of Manchester Cathedral. That's how transformational projects can be for cities and their communities and their economies. The other little funny ones just to share with you, which is sometimes you'll do crazy things in your job. For a little while I ran a charity, and I can tell you, never abseil off a 33-storey building in centre of London. Now, why am I even mentioning that? It's sometimes that was sort of about leadership and about taking risk, and actually being able to sort of stand up and say, I hate heights, but for this job and in this moment, I'm encouraging others to sort of fundraise for children and young people who need a house, a roof over their heads. And I have to show leadership. It was a very weird thing to do, and it was absolutely petrifying. But it's a sort of funny example of when we sort of have to sort of step forward and, you know, show that we're willing. And part of the other thing is also just about communication. And my funny example would be telling a joke to Prince Charles about his mum, which I did when doing a tour around Poundbury. I say it for amusement, but the point being is that how we interface with people and how we communicate is really important. And being able in your career to sort of find the art of gentle negotiation and listening and navigating sometimes quite complicated or actually quite tricky conversations. And I've done that in many projects where you're sort of not just advocating but also negotiating gently. And the other bit of communication I just wanted to mention was about just how we communicate visually. When I was at CABE, we were a publication house. We were delivering 40 major publications a year, and many of them hefty, and many of them in big print runs. So this little baby called Creating Excellent Buildings, which is one of mine, we probably did a print run of about 4,000 of those. It went to pretty much every planning department. But that was then. But the ability to write, but also I think visual communication is becoming so much more important, and we've got so much more at our fingertips in terms of visual communication. And I think what I've been really interested in is some of the conversations around digital that we're having at the moment about how digitization and planning sort of can talk to each other and really progress how we do planning. And a fantastic comment what I just heard this week, which was, you know, we used to do everything. What we sort of even just within the last decade, we are shifting from thinking about how we do things and how we present ourselves on a website, which is sort of where we were in the last, I'd say, decade and a bit. And we need to shift it to the capability and the data that's available to us and how it tells us what we do. And I think that's just really powerful. And it comes to my next point, which is don't be scared to change your opinion and how you do things, because things will come around you. Capability, technology, new information, politics, the economy changes, the market changes, new players come onto the scene, a new kind of house builder, a new requirement as to how we cope with empty space in the city centre, whatever it is. Be happy to change your mind about things, because we are dealing with a changing environment, political, social, scientific, environmental, that we're all sort of in that space, and that's kind of makes it really exciting. And then I suppose my final 2 points, which which are just sort of funny, which is have fun along the way. You know, the best thing to have in a career is friends that you work with, and that you can have a laugh with sometimes when it gets a bit niggly and it gets a bit tough and it gets a bit annoying. But also people that you kind of have a sort of sense of a kind of common journey and a common effort with. Definitely never undervalue those people around you. If you're lucky, and I'm sure many of you are, you've already gathered those friendships and they will stand you in good stead. You'll have many of those friendships that you'll gather throughout your career. And it's so funny how people pop up in different places that you've only today. I had a message from somebody who's in the department saying, oh my goodness, we worked together, you know, for a little while at CABE or wherever it was. And then earlier this week I was on a call and there was somebody from Crossrail 2 on. And even today you've heard from an ex-colleague of mine, Hala, from HS2. So this, it's a beautiful thing when you realize actually our world's not that big. And you'll keep coming across colleagues, and that's a brilliant thing. So you know, make your friendships, and they will last you your career. I can guarantee that. So you know, I just wanted to sort of give you that sort of flavour of my career, the things I've learned. Be passionate about what you do. It means a lot to people. You are changing opportunities for people. And you know, just be ready for the journey. It will be full of ups and downs. It'll be full of new challenges, but that is a fantastic career. And I know many of you are already in that space. You're already doing lots of things. You're already achieving a huge amount. And you know, you're already probably into even your second job, and you're already sort of going through those thought processes. But you know, enjoy the journey. That's what we're here to do. Thanks very much. I'd love to take any questions. Very happy to hear from anybody who wants to chuck a question at me, or Roshan might.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. That really was inspirational. We asked you to give us an inspirational speech, and you've done exactly that. So thank you very much. Are there any questions that we have for Joanna? Really ideal opportunity here to ask questions. It's excellent to hear about your journey, and I've kind of been on not the same one, obviously, a similar one. We all have our own journeys, and that's the point, isn't it? You make your own journey as well. But I think you had some really good points there about being inquisitive, the creative thinking, communications, and don't be scared about to change what you think as well. And all those things are interacted together as well, aren't they? They're kind of all in the mix. So really interesting.
And one of the things to say is that also, you know, if I've really enjoyed working in lots of different sectors. You know, I've always been close to the public sector, even as a, you know, when they were my client in the very early days. And now I'm obviously, you know, a fully fledged civil servant, and I've been there before, but before I was a civil servant working for a public agency. And, you know, it depends what sort of way you like to be, but the public sector needs, as we know, I just want to make this sort of plea, we're going to need the best people in local government, you know, taking forward planning in the reform space, but just generally. So if people haven't put your toe in the water with the public sector, please do. You get to sort of, you know, understanding how politics and decisions and things play out, and having that overview of lots of different policy dynamics that happen in local government, or national government for that matter, is really interesting. You know, how you deal with health and planning, how you deal with housing and planning, education and planning, all of those things sort of play through. And I would just really say to people, it's a rich space. And, you know, if you're ever thinking about it, it's a good time.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree that. We've got a few questions that have come up now. Susie Green's asked, what's your proudest achievement to date? That's a test.
Oh, my proudest achievement to date.
Probably the abseiling, is it?
Oh God, now I'm so scared. I just yoga breathing as my feet literally went down. I was so scared of doing that. I've been very lucky to work on. I was very lucky to work on the Olympics for a year. In the setup year, I was director of design from 2005 to 2006. And it's just a privilege to have been involved in that project at the get-go. So I did the first fix on the master plan. It's a tiny claim to fame, but being anywhere near that project is astonishing. And I think there are so many people who were involved in that, and that is the kind of stellar project. But the thing, you know, the thing I'm often the proudest of is that when people sort of who I've worked with over the years, and who particularly sort of from 2000 to 2010 and then beyond, you know, in every role, people sort of come back round again, and we kind of touch base. And I sort of think, oh my goodness, you're just on such a good path. You know, and it's partly because I've often sometimes recruited people who were making a bit of a career change. They were coming from architecture into CABE, or, you know, they were coming into a major transport project for the first time, things like that. And I think that's been, I continue to sort of love those moments when that happens.
Yeah. Well, what would you tell yourself to do differently when you started your career? That's come through from Faris Hussein. So would you go back and tell yourself to do something differently?
I would have done my undergrad degree. I did a 5-year undergraduate degree with a year out. I was very lucky. It was in a very low downtime in the market, and I was very lucky to get a year out job in London, which I was then invited back to when I graduated. That I got very right. That gave me a very clear path, I must say. What I would say I was worst at in my 30s is realizing, which I've alluded to already, just how much experience that I had available to me, particularly when I was at CABE, but pretty much in every role actually, and just making the most of that just depth of knowledge that was at our disposal. We were really busy, and moving on lots of fronts, and a really energetic team, which was fantastic. But sometimes that sort of finding the reflective time, and this is probably all of our challenges, finding the time to sort of reflect and think and talk and listen about issues. I'd say that is never time badly spent. You will always find that's the best thing to do, because it will take your thinking quicker, but it means you're making better decisions. But we all have to carve out time to do that. Yeah. So I would say, you know, those kind of quick drop-in events where you can learn and listen and get a different perspective, and have time. Our day jobs are so packed and so busy, particularly at the minute, I think, for all of us in this kind of online world. Finding those moments, which you're doing today, to sort of listen and reflect and learn, I just keep doing it.
Yeah, Katie Gregory asked a question actually, which you've probably answered, but just wonder if there was anything else about what would be your best tip to the young planners out there on how to be able to improve their knowledge and skills in the field.
Well, at the moment, it is amazing how much online stuff there is out there. And I think I mean, just for example, a dear friend of mine does a lot of the Friday events from the Academy of Urbanism, for example. And what's great about that is it's always got a bit of an international sort of tilt to it, which always makes you think differently. You know, hearing of how somebody does something, not just because they're not doing it in your context, and they're doing something, probably trying to do something different as well. So always challenges are, I suppose, our set perceptions about this is how you do something. And I think that's always really powerful. Yeah. So just on Monday, actually, for World Planning Day, I hosted a session for it turned out to be about 180 colleagues across Whitehall, with a colleague of mine who's in New York City, and she does the legislation for the climate policies for the city. And again, you just get this astonishing perspective. They're like a sort of, you know, they're almost like a sort of, they're like a city state. They make their own law, and yet they flood. And I mean, flood badly. You know, New York's very glamorous, but it's also got a serious issue about coastal flooding, and they're about to have a really serious issue about over reliance on basically fossil fuels for their energy sources. So they're desperately trying to deal with that. And I did want to say that actually before we close, which is, I think, you know, we all, and I think through my career, and certainly in the early days, I am also the generation of Brundtland. So the first statement about what sustainable development came out pretty much when I started my undergraduate degree. Yeah. You know, which is our responsibility to future generations in terms of the decisions we make now on the environment. And I will genuinely admit that there are in stages in my career when that definitely wasn't on the top of the list. Yeah. And I think all of us, there is no choice, and our responsibilities in that space are so huge. So when I'm talking about outcomes and end product, that has got to be, you know, that has got to be number one. We all have to, I know everybody knows this who's listening to this conversation, but think about that. Always have that, you know, what are our objectives in this space? What are we trying to do? I don't mean physical space. I mean, whatever policy you're working, whatever practice, whatever project, always challenge yourselves on that question. because we've got about 10 years and it isn't very long.
Yeah,
so our decisions now are really important.
Really good point. Ryan Walker asked us a question, asked you a question about when you first began your career, did you set out with the intention of one day becoming the chief planner?
No, not at all. Do you want to know the honest truth? Planning was the 5th choice in my university entry, and I was going to be. I had a Northern Irish education. It's a long story, but anyway, the careers advice was non-existent, and I was good at, funnily enough, standing up and making arguments. Was a bit mouthy. So this not very modern careers teacher said, I think you'd be good as a lawyer, and I went, okay. And so but my dad actually is an architect and planner, and I had a conversation with him, and I am not joking, and I said, well, what shall I put down for my 5th choice? And he said, well, you should be, he said I think you should put down planning. So I did, and I loved it from the minute I had my interview, and I feel very lucky that he gave me that very gentle, it wasn't advice, it was a suggestion, and because it's really suited me, it suited my range, and there really hasn't ever been a dull moment. It's been such a sort of lovely range of things to do and engagements to be involved in. So yeah,
that's brilliant. I think that's a good point for us to finish on. Joanna, thank you very much for your inspiring speech and for the conversation now, and responding so well to the questions that we could get through. Apologies for those that put questions in that we couldn't quite get through, but thank you, Joanna, and we look forward to engaging with you again in the future.
Thanks very much, Roshan, and lovely to at least be virtually with you all today, and have a very good evening, everyone. Thanks.
Indeed. Thank you, Joanna. So it's been a great conference today. I have the wonderful job now to provide you with takeaways from the day. So if there's a knock at your door, it's not my magic ability to have conjured up a delivery for you all. I'm really sorry about that. Maybe next year we'll look at that. But the conference has taken us on a journey around the UK to the West Midlands and the HS2 stations, to Belfast and the Connswater Greenway, to London, the Olympic Park, to Leicester, Scotland, New Zealand, and lots of other destinations. And there's just one day been a huge number of topics, and it just goes to show how expansive and interesting planning as a career is, that Joanna's just highlighted as well. We've had legal sessions, design, placemaking, digital planning, and lots of excellent information about taking your career on its own journey through RTPI chartered membership and the tools to help you negotiate the employment market and build your career, and of course the importance and value of mentoring. I like the quote earlier from Olivine Tayo, you are the CEO of your own life. And the thing I'd like to add to this is never fire yourself, but maybe review your own corporate strategy or brand, or even your own risk register, but keep it on track. And Lucy Seymour Bowen said today, be your own self. And that is so important. Really value yourself. Today's topic has been New Decade, New Leaders. And I'd like to remind everyone that current and future planners are at the heart of the RTPI's corporate strategy, which we launched at the start of this year. And we need you to step up and provide the leadership and innovation to take us forward in these difficult times, but yet exciting times. We're faced by change, but change is what planners do, and it's certainly what young planners are known to embrace. And the RTPI's campaign for Plan the World We Need sets out many of the challenges we face and how planning is central to making positive and inclusive change. Don't forget to tell your friends about the RTPI and what a valuable career planning offers. There's room for more to be involved with us. And also share your own young planners' experiences to other colleagues, including the non-young planners you work with as well. And a little advert for the RTPI's award for planning excellence, including Young Planner of the Year. They're open at the moment and entries close on the 14th of December. All of today's sessions will be available on the RTPI's YouTube channel, so you can go back and check anything that you couldn't attend today. And I'd like to say a really big thank you to our sponsors today, Carrington West, Francis Taylor Building, Landmark Chambers, Pegasus, and our exhibitors, including the Planner magazine. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists for the time and effort and insight. They've been very engaging sessions, and I know how much effort goes into preparing them. Thank you to the Young Planners Organising Committee. You had everything shifted differently this year, so thank you to you all. And I'd like to thank my RTPI colleagues as well. Behind the scenes, they've been very active and busy, but at least this year they won't be dealing with any lost property inquiries, or I hope not. Anyway, thank you to you all for joining the conference, your engagement, your questions and your time, and I trust that you have got some value out of the day. I really hope that we'll be able to see you in Edinburgh in 2021, but if not, we'll see you virtually. The day is not yet over, so can I now invite you to go and get yourself a drink of your choice and maybe some popcorn, and be back for probably 5:05 when we have the wrap party and a special edition of We Got Planning news for you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and stay safe.